श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् यो नित्यमच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मम् व्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः। We continue with the exposition of the 59th sutra, that is 57th sutra. Atmapaharamavade swatantram yanjirani naive swatantramam podu illayai vidum. In the 58th and 59th sutras, sthana pramanattale ukaram avadharanartham tal pirarkashesham anni yanjirade. And the 57th sutra is explained in this manner. Sheshatvam illada podu atmapahara rupavana swatantriya buddhi nadakkayane ஸ்வரூபம் அழிந்து விடும் என்னுமத்தை தர்ஷிப்பிக்கிறார். மேல் இரண்டு வாக்கியத்தாலே ஆத்மாபகாரமாவது என்று தொடங்கி, அதாவது யோ அந்யதா சந்தமாத்மானம் அந்யதா பிரதிபத்யதே கிந்தேன ந கிருதம் பாபம் சோரேணாத்மாபகாரினா என்று சர்வ பாபமூலமாகச் சொன்ன ஆத்மாபகாரமாவதே தன் ஸ்வரூபம் ஸ்வதந்திரம் என்கிற பிரதிபத்தி. சுதந்திரமாமளவில் அசன்மேவா என்கிறபடியே ஸ்வரூபம் இல்லையாய் விடும் என்கை. ஆகையால் சேஷத்துவமில்லாத போது ஸ்வரூபமில்லை என்ன தட்டில்லை என்று கருத்து. ஆகா, பிரகிருத்தியர்த்தமான ஈஸ்வரனுடைய காரணத்துவமும் தாத்வர்த்தமான ரக்ஷகத்துவமும் அர்த்தபலாத்தால் வந்த ஸ்ரீயப்பதித்துவமும் பிரத்யே சித்தமான சேதன சேஷத்துவ பிரதிசம்பந்தியான சேஷித்துவமாயிர அகாரார்த்தத்தை அருளிச் செய்தாராய்த்து. So very beautifully Swami Manavala Mamani summarizes the meaning of the sutra, which says Sheshattvamillada podu Swarupamillai. And also he says Atmapaharamavadu Swatantram Yengiranilu Swatantramam podu Illayai vidum. So in the Vedas there is a very beautiful statement which says Asanneva sabhavati asad brahmeti veda cheti asti brahmeti chedveda santamenam tato viduhu. So what is the meaning of these two sentences? Asanneva sabhavati asad brahmeti veda cheti. So here, for those who know Sanskrit to a certain extent, Asat Brahma iti Veda Chet has to be slightly modified. Brahma Sat iti Aveda Chet is how it has to be interpreted. That is how the commentators comment upon this beautiful statement. What does it say? Brahma sat iti aveda chet. If a person does not understand, so understanding here is actually realization. If a person is unable to realize the existence of the Supreme Brahman, that is Lord Narayana according to us, Saha asan eva bhavati. He is as good as non-existent. That means his existence is meaningless. So unless a person realizes the existence of the Supreme Brahman, that is Lord Narayana, his existence is meaningless. I will give a small example to illustrate what it means. Suppose there is a husband who has married a lady, a person who has married a lady, he is called as a husband. But if he does not fulfill any of his duties, so he has to take care of his wife, he has to provide her with food and shelter, etc. Of course, I am talking in the context of the earlier days of the Indian society, when the ladies were not allowed to go out of the house and earn some money for their livelihood, etc. So, or even if you take the role of a son, what is the role of a son? He has to take care of his parents when they become old. Suppose there is a son who does not fulfill any of his responsibilities a son should fulfill. Then what do people say? There is no difference between his being alive and being dead. That is what he says. That is what is meant in this context. Saha asan eva bhavati. That person is as good as non-existent. Because Brahma sat iti avedati. Because the main objective of the human life, though none of us, like me, I can say, I am not competent to talk about others. Though I have studied so much and heard so much from my own gurus, has the realization dawned upon me that the main objective of life is to achieve the realization of God. Has this realization dawned upon me? Actually, it has not dawned upon me. So unless a person realizes that he is the very, what they call in chaste English as summum bonum of life, he is to realize the Supreme Brahman. If he doesn't do that, then he is as good as non-existent. His existence is meaningless. So here also, Swami Manavada Mavani explains it in the same manner. Swatantramam podu illayayudu. If a person thinks that he is independent, he is not dependent on the Supreme Lord, he is not subservient to the Supreme Lord, then his existence is meaningless, or he is as good as non-existent. And a beautiful verse is quoted here. Yo anyatha santam atmanam anyatha pratipadyate. The actual nature of the Atman, Jiva Atman, is subservience to the Supreme Lord. So, if a person does not realize that this Jiva Atma, individual soul, is subservient to the Paramatma of the Supreme Lord, or otherwise also, then what happens? If he thinks otherwise, means if he thinks that he is independent, he is not subservient to anybody, as is mentioned, Ishvaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. I am the Lord. I enjoy everything. Everything is there for my enjoyment. Adhyaha abhijanavan asmi. I have a great following. Onyosti sadasho maya. Who is equal to me? These are all the qualities of people with asuri sampat. That is what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Atma Paharamavadi Swatantram Yanjiraninaini. So that is the taking away or abduction of the Atma, or actually taking away of the Atma, that means losing himself. If a person feels or thinks that he is independent and not subservient to the Lord, then he has lost himself. He has no way of being redeemed at any stage. So these are two extremes. If a person does not know he is subservient, that is one thing he may gradually realize. But if he insists that he is never subservient, or if he insists that he is totally independent, then it means that he has lost himself. There is no way that he can be redeemed at any stage until he realizes that he is subservient to the Supreme Lord and not independent. So that is why he says, Sheshatvam illada podu illayai vidum. When he does not realize his subservience to the Supreme Lord, he is as good as non-existent. So this is the purport of this sutra. And he also further says, Aheyal Sheshatvam illada podu Swarupam illai ennattatillai ennu karuttu. And then Swami Manoharamani beautifully summarizes 4 important points which are mentioned by the word A. So this is one single syllable A has the following meanings. What are they? Aha prakrityarthamana ishwaranudaya karanattvamum. As I mentioned, according to the rules of Sanskrit language, we have 2 components. Suppose you have the word Ramaya. So here Rama is the nominal stem and Aya is actually the case ending of the dative case ending. So all that is that stem, nominal stem and the suffix are together in the word A, which you have seen how it has happened, etc. Because you have already studied that portion where it says Chaturthi Eri Kariyum. So kindly recall that class. So which are the aspects that have been covered by the syllable A? Prakrityarthamana Ishwaranudaya Karanattvamum. The meaning of the nominal stem of the word come alphabet A is that the Supreme Lord is the cause of the entire universe. Then Dhat Vartamana Rakshakattvamam, if we consider it as a verb, so there are 4 aspects here. So if we consider it as a noun, then noun has a nominal stem and also a suffix. If we consider it as a verb, which you have already seen, then it has a root and a suffix, as you have in Gachati, Grinhati, etc. in Sanskrit. So if you consider it as a noun, then you have 2 aspects, that is the nominal stem, or as Pratipadika in Sanskrit, and the suffix. Considering it as a verb, then you have the root and also the suffix. There are 4 components. So these 4 components together convey 4 meanings. What are they? Ishwaranudaya Karanattvamum, that the Supreme Lord is the cause of everything. Considering it as a verb, what does it mean? Dhat Vartamana Rakshakattvamum. So in the verb you have the root and the suffix. So the root is conveying the meaning of his being our protector. What does protection mean? We have already explained in detail. Then Artha Balattalvanda Shriyah Patitvamum. So when you say something, a particular word, several things are implied. So when you say Supreme Lord is Rakshaka or the protector, then automatically it implies that he is the Lord of Goddess Shri or Shriyapati, the husband of Shriyapati, the consort of Shriyapati. And then Pratyaya Siddhamana Chetana Sheshatva Pratisambandhiyana Sheshitvamahira Akarartattai Arudichaidaraiti Pratyaya Siddhamana Chetana Sheshatva. Then you have the suffix which actually conveys the meaning that the Chetana is the Shesha or the subservient. So when you say Dasharathasya Putraha Ramaha, Rama is the son of Dasharatha. What does this actually imply? It implies that Dasharatha is the father of Rama. So once you say Rama is the son of Dasharatha, you need not once again say Dasharatha is the father of Rama. Once you say Rama is the son of Dasharatha, you need not say Dasharatha is the father of Rama. So once you say the Chetana is the subservient person, Chetana Sheshatva, that is, the individual soul is subservient, it automatically suffices to say that the Lord is Sheshi. So like you have two mutually connected words, father, son, husband, wife, then brother, sister, or sister, brother in that case, or several other such words. In Sanskrit, you have a huge repository of such words. For example, substrate and substratum, these two words are used extensively in philosophical parlance, not ordinary English, because they are technical terms. So Adhara and Adheya, for example, which is used in Sanskrit. So Adhara is the location or the locus, and Adheya, a very rare word, which denotes the object that exists in the location. For example, now I am having this phone in front of me and the table in front of me. So the phone is on the table. When I say the phone is on the table is the Adhara or the locus on which or in which the phone is situated. So then what is the word to denote the phone which is located on the table or in the table? In Sanskrit, you have a word for it to denote that thing which is known as Adheya. The location is called as Adhara or Adhikarana, whereas the object that exists in the location is known as Adheya. I don't think there is an equal word in English to denote the word or denote the exact meaning of what is conveyed by the word Adheya. So these are called Pratisambandhi Shabdas. So they are mutually dependent subshabdas, or words having mutually dependent meanings. For example, you have, in this context, Shesha and Sheshi. Shesha means the object, that is object or entity or person that is subservient. So the person to whom this entity is subservient is known as Sheshi. That is why I mentioned in earlier class, there are several types of relationships between the Supreme Lord and the individual soul. It says Swamitva, Atmatva, Sheshatva, Pumstvadhyaha, Swamino Gunaha. Swamitva, Swamitvam, Atmatvam, Sheshitvam, Pumstvam. Svebhyaha, Dasatva, Dehatva, Vashitva, Stritva, Daitva. So, respectively, four mutually dependent words are, if he is the Swami, we are the Dasas. So, the master-servant relationship. So, if there has to be a servant, there has to be a master, otherwise he will not be called as a servant. So, if a master is there, then has to be a servant, otherwise he will not be called as a master. So, before Rama married Sita. Can he be called as a husband? No, because there is nobody to show that there is no wife. So how can he be a husband? He is a bachelor. Or before Sita Rama married Rama, did she have a husband? No, because she is a spinster. So unless there is another object that actually fulfills the criteria of the relationship, these two things cannot come into existence. So Swamitva, Swamitva, Swamitva Dasatva, Swami Dasa Bhava, Swami Pritya Bhava. Swami and Pritya are two mutually dependent words. Atmatvam, Dehatvam, Dehatma, Swarupam, or Sharira, Shariri Bhava, as Ramanujacharya used to put it. So this is the body, and the Atma within this body is known as the Shariri or Atma. Similarly, when you go to the stage of the Jivatma and Paramatma, the Jivatma is in the form of is in the place of the body, whereas Paramatma is in the form of the soul that exists within the body. Swamitva, Atmatva, Sheshatva, Sheshatva and Sheshitva, and Pumstva and Stritva. So in a husband-wife relationship, the wife is Stri, whereas the husband is Puman, is a male, wife is female. Of course, in those days, they did not think about gay people, etc. So, just this is a passing remark, don't mistake me. So, these are Pratisambandhi Shabdas, as we see that. And to understand these texts, we have to know properly these technical terms. So, that is why Manawala Mamini says, Pratye Siddhamana Chetana Sheshatva Pratisambandhiyana Sheshitva Akararthattai Arulichaidaraiti. So all these four meanings are obtained by the single word come syllable of Akara. So how this meaning has been obtained? Can anyone think of four meanings for a single syllable? That is the greatness of Sanskrit language, and also how the interpretations exist in our ancient Shastras. Because I have not come across any word or syllable, for that matter, which can actually convey four meanings at the same time. That too in a very systematic and precise manner. So that doesn't mean that other languages are inferior. It means that Sanskrit language is so rich and also so systematic. So then we come to the next sutra. Anantaram Madhyamaksharamana Ukaratthukku Arthattai Arthamarulichai Varaha Upakramikkirar Sthana Pramanattale Ukaram Avadharanartham Indre Adavadi Tadeva Bhutam Tadubhavyama Idam Indram Tadevagnistatvayustatsuryastadu Chandrama Aham Ennamityadi Hadide Evakarasthanatile Ukarate Prayokikakandeyale Sthana Pramanattale Ukaram Avadharanattai Arthamaha Udaittayirikkum Yengai. So first the sutra is Sthana Pramanattale Ukaram Avadharanartham, which means a particular word, when it is used in a particular context, has a particular meaning. So depending upon the context of the word in the context in which it is used, the word, the meaning of the word is determined. So I will give an example in Sanskrit because I cannot recall an example immediately, an English example immediately. So in Sanskrit, there is a word called Saindhava. Saindhava means there are two meanings. One meaning is horse, and another meaning is salt. So Saindhava Lavana means a particular type of salt which was extensively used in India, and even now Ayurvedic doctors prescribe this type of salt for particular medical conditions, not the regular salt that is obtained from the sea, which is iodized and all those things these days. That is, iodine is added. Sometimes some people say it should be added, some people say no, etc. It is not pertinent to the present context. So Saindhava Lavana means, Saindhava itself means a particular type of rock salt, we can say, not the salt that is obtained by the sea. So suppose a person says Saindhava Manaya, bring the Saindhava. So what should the person who is listening to do? Should he bring a horse or should he bring a salt? Should he bring salt? So the meaning of the word Saindhava has to be interpreted based on the context. Suppose the person is leaving for a war, or he is leaving on some expedition. Then when the person says Saindhava Manya, then his servant should go and get the horse. Suppose a person is having lunch or dinner, and he finds that there is a little bit of less salt in a particular dish. So many a times people add some more salt. That is why it is actually, even today in the modern context, when people eat on dining tables, salt, pepper, etc. are kept readily for use because some people want to add more salt. So there is this habit of people adding salt to some dishes where salt is less, or they want more salt in the dish. So when a person who is having lunch or dinner says Saindhava Manaya, then definitely the word Saindhava refers to salt only. So how to determine the meaning? What is the meaning of the word Saindhava? It is based on the context. So if the person who says Saindhava Manaya is going on an expedition, then the horse has to be brought from the stable. Or if a person is having lunch and he says Saindhava Manaya, then he has to bring salt from the kitchen and give it to him. So this is what is known as Sthana Pramanattale. That means, in one way, the example I have given is based on the context. Here, based on the context, not only based on the context, and it's also based on the particular position of the word in the sentence. I will give one example from Sanskrit. So let us assume that there is a sentence. Ramaha Lakshmanasya grihe phalam khadati. This is one sentence. Ramaha Lakshmanasya grihe phalam khadati. What does this mean? Rama eats a fruit sitting in Lakshmana's house. Suppose I change the position of the word Lakshmanasya and say Ramaha grihe Lakshmanasya phalam khadati. Then the meaning totally changes. Rama, sitting in his house, eats the fruits of Lakshmana. That means fruits brought by Lakshmana. So the meaning of the word Lakshmana should be determined based on its position in the sentence. So this is a highly technical aspect of Sanskrit language, but since we are dealing with Sanskrit, a Sanskrit mantra, which has several concepts belonging to several of the Shastras, like Mimamsa Shastra. This concept belongs to what is known as Purva Mimamsa Shastra, which deals with the interpretation of Vedic passages. So here you have Akara, which means the Supreme Lord Narayana, on the one hand, and on the other hand you have Makara, which means the Jivatma. And in the middle you have Ukara. A, U and Ma. Idu A ennum, U ennum, Ma ennum, moonru thiruvaksharam. That is what was mentioned earlier. So the word Om, which is the first alphabet or first syllable, and also the first word of the three words of the mantra Om Namo Narayana. In the word Om, you have three components, namely Akara, Ukara, and Makara. Akara has conveyed or conveys four meanings, which we just noted earlier today. Then we have already said Makara, actually Makaram Jivavachi. Makaram Iravatindavadaksharamai Jnanavachiyumai Ripum. So Makara denotes the individual soul or Jivatma. And this U is situated between A and Ma. So it actually is used in an assertive sense. Sthana pramanattale ukaram avadharanartham. What is the meaning of the word avadharana? Avadharana means assertion. So the word ukara is used in the sense of assertion because of its being situated between A and Ma. That is what is known as sthana pramana. By means of its existing between akara and makara, the ukara denotes what is known as assertion. How do we know this? Is there any precedent to interpret ukara in this manner? Because U does not have any particular meaning. In Sanskrit, we call these as stobhaksharas. So, for example, when we say, oh my God, what does oh my God mean? Or at least here you have three words. In English, you say, gosh, what's happened? What does the word gosh mean? In Kannada and other, we say, ayyo. So in Sanskrit, we say, hanta. Hanta harishe anukampayam. That's what. Say, ayyo. That means either when you are very excited or when you have to express compassion. So you say, gosh, you say, oh my God. In Sanskrit, we say, ayyo Rama. What has happened? Something like that. Or in English, in the novels, they say, Jesus Christ, what has happened? Something like that. That doesn't mean he is actually remembering Jesus Christ. It's only an expression of excitement or compassion or something like that. So these words like gosh, etc., do not have any particular meaning as espoused by the king. So what happens? Sthana pramanattale. You have to interpret the meaning of these alphabets, come words, alphabet come word, words based on the context. So here he gives two examples. Tadeva bhutam tadubhavyamaidam tadevagnistadvayustadsuryastadu chandramaha. So in these two passages, the word U, tadeva bhutam tat U, tat U bhavyamaidam, or tadevagnistadvayustadsuryastat U chandramaha. And you have several such passages. So Manavada Mamuni has quoted two here. On the other hand, we have Sa Ushreyan Bhavati Jayamanaha Gandhira Sahkavaya Unnayanti. Saha U Shreyane Bhavati Jayamanaha. This passage mentions about the greatness of the incarnation of the Supreme God. Saha Shreyaneva Bhavati. So the word U is used in the sense of Eva, which means verily, which roughly means verily, or surely, which means avadharana, definitely, without any doubt. So several shades of meanings can come or can be obtained from the word eva. So he says, Yennumityadihalile Evakarasthanatile உகாரத்தை பிரயோகிக்க காண்கையாலே ஸ்தான பிரமாணத்தாலே உகாரம் அவதாரணத்தை அர்த்தமாக உடைத்தாயிருக்கும் என்கை. So therefore, since the ukara is situated between akara and makara, and we have several instances where ukara has been used in the sense of eva, in a highly assertive sense. Here also, ukaram avadharanattai arthamaha udaitha irukkum. So ukara is assertive, used in an assertive sense. So what is this assertion? That is once again explained in a highly technical manner by Swami Manavana Mamuni. He says, Ittal pirarka sheshamanne engiradu. So when you say the individual soul is subservient only to the Supreme Lord Narayana, that is what is assertion. So in this context, it means only. So the meaning of the word Om is that the individual soul is subservient only to the Supreme Lord Narayana. So then, what is the meaning of the assertion if you explain it in other words? Ittal pirarka sheshamanne. When you say he is subservient only to the Supreme Lord Narayana, it means he is not at all subservient to anybody else other than Lord Narayana. That is what is mentioned. Ittal pirarka shesham anne. He is not subservient to anybody else other than Narayana. How do you get this meaning? So in Sanskrit, you have a very, very important concept. I will just, I have prepared a slide. I will just try to show it to you. So luckily, I have found the slide which is relevant to this context. I will share it now. Are you able to see this slide?
Yes, Swami.
Yes. So here we have three meanings of evakara according to the Shastras. So those who have little bit knowledge of Sanskrit can actually understand this very easily. So considering the sentence, Parthaha eva dhanurdharaha. Partha means Arjuna. Arjuna alone is the person who is sporting the bow. So here Partha is the Visheshya or the noun that is qualified by the adjective Dhanurdhara. Dhanurdhara means a person who is wearing or having a bow with him. So that means this is known as Visheshya Sangata Evakara. It means the evakara is associated with the visheshya or the noun that is being qualified by the adjective. So this is known as Anyayoga Vyavacheda. Here the word eva is associated with the noun or visheshya that is qualified by the adjective visheshana, and therefore it conveys the meaning that others do not possess the same attribute denoted by the adjective. So Partha Anyasminne Dhanurdharatvayogaha Vyavachidyate. That is how we say. That means when you say Partha eva Dhanurdharaha, it means that others do not have the quality of Dhanurdharatva, meaning they don't actually, they are not sporting above. Example, Bhima or Nakula or Sahadeva or Yudhishthira. The second example is Shankhaha Panduraha Eva. So here Shankha is the noun and Pandura is the adjective, and Eva is found after the word Pandura, which is the adjective. This is known as Visheshana Sangata Evakara. That means, here you see, here the word Eva is associated with the adjective Visheshana, that is qualifying the noun. Therefore, it conveys the meaning that the object conveyed by the noun can possess only that attribute denoted by the adjective and not any similar attribute. So, when the Shanka is white only, it means Shanka cannot be red or black or any other color. And finally, you have what is known as Kriya Sangata Evakara, which says Atyanta Yoga Vyavachena, which means the word Eva is found after the noun, which says, which the example is Neelam Sarojam Bhavatyeva. So here the word Eva is associated with the word verb, Kriya. Therefore, it conveys the meaning that the object conveyed by the noun can possess only that attribute denoted by the adjective and never any other similar attribute. So, the Saroja or the water lily, which you have seen here, that actually becomes what is known as Vikasa. It attains Vikasa. I am not able to immediately recall. Blooms when the rays of the moon come. For example, if it's a lotus blooms due to the rays of the sun, whereas the water lily is known as Saroja in this context, blooms when the moon rises. That can be of the blue color only and not any other color. So this is known as Atyanta Ayoga Vyavachena. So why is it relevant in this context? So I will give this example and then come to the present example. So here you see in the Brahma Sutra there are 4 padas. That is, the first pada is Ayoga Vyavachena pada. That means these padas negate the notion that Brahman is not the cause of the universe. That is, Brahma Jagat Karanameva. Then the subsequent 3 padas convey the concept of Anya Yoga Vyavacheda, which means these padas negate the notion that some entity other than the Brahman is the cause of the universe. So Brahmaiva Jagat Karanam, Brahman alone is the cause of the universe. So this is the use of Anya Yoga Vyavacheda and Ayoga Vyavacheda. In the present context, Swami Pidalokacharya says both of them are valid when we consider the meaning of Ukara. It says the Jivatma is subservient to the Supreme Lord alone, and Jivatma alone can be subservient to the Supreme Lord to the maximum possible extent. So that's what he says in the commentary. Avadharanattukkum ayoga vyavachedamaadal, anyayoga vyavachedamaadal. So there are 2 meanings for the word avadharana, that is eva, which is translated as only. Ahayali avadharanattal cholluhirade yedanna rudichaihirar. In adavadu avadharana vachakamana mukarattatal keel ishvara sheshama hachunna Atmavastu Anyarka Sheshamanne Ennumidattai Sholluhiradingai. So this Chetana of the Jivatma is subservient to the Supreme Lord alone and not to anybody else. That is what mainly it is Anyayoga Vyavacheda. And Ayoga Vyavacheda also can be said in the sense Sheshatva definitely exists in the Atma. There cannot be any other place where Sheshatva exists as it exists in the Jiva. Of course, you have Achetana also, it is subservient. But the way Chetana is subservient to the Atma is totally different from the way Achetana is subservient to the Atma. Because there is a huge difference between Chetana and Achetana. Because Chetanas have a small iota of Swatantriya. That is mentioned in the Brahma Sutras, where it says Karta Shastrarthavatva. Does Kartritva or doership or agency exist to the in the Jivatma or not? When the question is raised, of course, we say it is totally subservient. But in that subservience also, there is some Swatantriya that is given by the Supreme Lord Himself to the Jivatma. To that extent, Swatantriya is there. Otherwise, if you were to be totally subservient, which we accept, but that subservience includes a small iota of Swatantriya that is given to him. That's why I am mentioning this. This especially mentioned in the Sri Bhashyam. If you are totally subservient and he has no Swatantriya at all, then what is the meaning of the Vijinisheda Shastras? Why were the do's and don'ts specifically laid down for the Jivatmas to choose from? So the Swatantriya is there in the sense that it is part of the subservience. So suppose there is a higher officer, everything that he says has to be obeyed by the subordinate. But once the officer may say, now I am giving you the power to take a decision in this regard. You have to independently take a decision without consulting me in a particular context. Then is it subservience or is it Swatantriya given to the subordinate? It means that Swatantriya is also the result of subordination only. So it's a very subtle issue which you have to understand in this context. So even the Swatantriya given to the Jivatma is a part of the Sheshatva, because that Swatantriya is given by the Supreme Lord, it is not himself. So here what happens? The Supreme Lord is the Shesha. He is alone he is the Sheshi, and he alone is the Sheshi. The Jivatma can never be the Sheshi. That is what is mentioned here. And Sheshatva alone exists in the Jivatma. Sheshitva cannot exist in the Jivatma. So this is what is mentioned. And here also he says, Periya Piratya Rakka Sheshamanne Shesham Yengiradennum Sholluvarhal Adilum Anya Sheshatvam Kaihaye Pradhanam. Then the question is raised, is he not subservient to Goddess Mahalakshmi? You are telling only to the Supreme Lord, then does he not be subservient to Goddess Lakshmi? That question is answered in the next sutra, which we will deal with in the next class. So today's has been a highly technical session. I hope all of you have been able to understand what I have mentioned. Still, if you have any further doubts, you may kindly ask, and I will try to clarify them. But one thing we have to realize is, these are all, as I have been mentioning, our Sampradaya, Shri Vaishnava Sampradaya is based on the Vishishtadvaita philosophy, which has very strong theoretical foundations. All these are backed up by strong logical and theoretical foundations which can never be shaken. That is why it has survived for such a long time. Though, of course, today there are very few number of persons studying it. One main thing, one lacuna in many people who give discourses on these topics today is 90% of the Sampradaya scholars have not studied Sanskrit, and also they have not studied the Shastras. So these aspects they will just pass over actually and not go into the details, which will actually hinder the correct and exact understanding. This is not to belittle any persons who give discourses. But actually what has happened is the concepts of the Shastras are embedded in Sampradaya Granthas also. That is why the theoretical foundations are so strong. And these can be explained only by persons who have also studied the Shastras in a formal and in the Gurukula system under a qualified Acharya. Then only justice can be done while explaining these things. So that aspect has to be kept in mind, because many other people every day I get mails and alerts that this person is taking Mumuksupadi, that person. Of course, we respect each and every person for their value and also scholarship. But today, the scholars who come from Tamil Nadu lack the knowledge of Sanskrit and Shastras not due to their own ignorance or due to their own incompetence. They are quite competent. But due to the policy of the Tamil government, they have been totally eliminated from even knowing the basic Sanskrit words, due to which I regularly listen to several discourses, and all the Sanskrit words are pronounced in a very bad manner most of the times. There might be exceptions, which actually is a great disservice to the Sampradaya, because always our Sampradaya is Ubhaya Vedanta, which consists of Samskrita Vedanta and Dravida Vedanta. So knowledge of both of these is very much essential. So that lacuna has to be overcome by those people who are not able to, who do not possess that knowledge of Sanskrit and also the Shastras. So any questions?
So I think in the chat, Swami, Govinachari was asking that you were saying that Jiva is subservient to the Lord alone, as shown by the word Eva. But he's asking about the Jiva is also, the Jivatman is also subservient to the Acharya or other Bhagavatas, other Vaishnavas. So yes, I think this is going to be covered in the next sutras, right?
So in the first stage, yes, that is correct. So you have several stages in the. So for example, when you study in the 5th standard or the 6th standard, when you are young, you are taught this is what is the final thing. But as you go deep, you are taught, no, this is what you have to learn more, this is what you have to learn more, this is what you have to learn more. So when you progress as a person, as a Sri Vaishnava or as a Sri Vaishnava devotee, what happens? You transcend several stages and then become complete. So when you say Bhagavat Sheshatva, now we are talking about Bhagavat Sheshatva. So after a particular stage, you become Sheshastu Bhagavata. So we call it as Bhagavata Shesha, as he has rightly pointed out about the Acharya or other Bhagavatas. So what does Bhagavata mean? What does the word Bhagavata mean? Bhagavataha ayam Bhagavataha. A person who is totally subservient to the Supreme Lord. So, if you cannot become totally subservient to the Supreme Lord, you become subservient to a person who is totally subservient to the Supreme Lord. So, it is one way, if you are unable to do that, you do this. Or when you see that a person is a great devotee of the Lord, you automatically become subservient to him. Because my Acharya used to say, and this is well exposed in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, when a person, a honest and sincere devotee, he has to be an honest and sincere devotee, realizes that another devotee is more evolved than him, automatically he will become his servant. So that is why we say Bhagavata Sheshatva. Bhagavata Sheshatva means what? Shesha to a person who is subservient to Bhagavan. So there also the Bhagavat Sambandha is not left out. So in the beginning, you are Shesha to Supreme Lord alone. But as you progress, you are Shesha to not only the Supreme Lord, you are Shesha to a person who is subservient to the Supreme Lord also. There also the Supreme Lord's relationship is very, very, very important. So this is the first stage. But as you progress, when you suppose you realize that one more person is more nearer to the Supreme Lord, that is the very sum and substance of our Sampradaya. So that is why we have Antimopaya Nishtha, as I explained in the previous class. So ultimately you become subservient to his devotees, which will lead you faster, not only to his devotees. That is why Nammalvar says, Sapta Parvadasya, and even Kulashekara Alvar says in his Mukunda Mala, he says, Tvad Bhritya Bhritya Paricharaka Bhritya Bhritya Bhrityasya Bhritya Ikimam Smara Tokanatha. So the Lord's servant, his 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 servant. And then I am that servant of that servant who is the seventh level servant of you. So you become so humble. Your humility is so great that even the seventh stage servant of the Supreme Lord you become subservient to him. That is because they are Bhagavatas, which means they belong to the Supreme Lord. So Acharya is Bhagavata Shrestha, who leads you to the Supreme Lord. So you are subservient to him. Because, as I mentioned in the previous class, the Lord likes people who are subservient to his devotees more than those who are subservient to he himself. That is the beauty of Shiva Ishtava Sampradaya, which has realized this aspect. So many a times we see, suppose a person loves his wife very much, and there is a servant who is more subservient to his wife than he himself. He likes him more than the servant who is subservient to himself. Because that servant who is subservient to his wife is fulfilling all her desires. And that wife is closest to him. He loves her so much. And we see, suppose there is a father and there is a servant who is rendering service to his son. That servant becomes very close to the father because he is serving his son who is very close to him. So a person automatically loves another person who is serving his loved one more than a person who is serving he himself. This is quite natural. So these intrinsic values have been realized and exposed in the Shiva Ishtava Sampradaya, which makes it more and more evolved. Because it is based on principles of nature, which we see are principles that are prevalent in nature. So I hope you have received the answer to your question. So he is, when you say subservient to Bhagavata, there itself lies the answer. Are you satisfied with the answer? Are you convinced?
Perfect answer, Swami. Thank you so much. That's a really, really wonderful answer.
Yes. Any other question?
Adiyan Dasan Namaskaram. This is Ram Srinivas.
Yes,
I just have one question, Swami. Swami, you mentioned that as opposed to Achetana, it is only Chetana that can actually be subservient to the Lord.
Yes.
But now if we consider Jivatma to be the Chetana, is the body of the Jivatma not Achetana? Because whatever the body might be, body is like the shell, which is the outer part of the soul. Is
Yes.
that not Achetana? Now this Achetana can be either human, it can be animal, it can be vegetation, it can be any inanimate object.
Yes.
So how is it that this Achetana, that is the outer shell, which protects the Chetana, which is the inner soul, how does it actually either, permit or, probably prevent this Chetana to actually become subservient to the Lord? Number one. Number two, what happens when the Chetana, that is the soul, goes out of the Achetana, which is the outermost body, that is the shell? then what is the scope of this particular Chetana? How is it then able to be subservient to the Lord?
So there are the very good question, very profound question also. So why I mentioned the Achetana, the subservience of Achetana is different from the subservience of Chetana. The Achetana has no swatantriya at all whatsoever. It is purely commanded by the Supreme Lord himself. Whereas Chetana has a small iota of swatantriya, where he can actually say, I am independent, and actually lose his existence. So he is actually given independence in the sense that either he can redeem himself or he can lose himself or he can perish. But the Achetana does not have that problem. It is totally subservient always because it has no independence at all whatsoever. So that is the difference between the subservience of Achetana and subservience of Chetana. Because suppose there is a stone that is lying in front of your house. You throw it somewhere, it will not say, why have you thrown me? You keep it there itself, it will not say, why you have kept me here. Whereas the Chetana can ask such a question. He can say, of course, he may not be at this stage, when we are in the stage of bondage, we may not be able to question why God is doing something like that because we have not realized. But once that realization comes, you can question, for example, Nammalvar question, why have you kept me here? Though you have given me your divine vision, still why have you kept me with this body in this material world? So even that is, he himself says that, still I think I have some swatantriya, that is why I am questioning you. Still I have a lot more to realize. So that is the basic difference between the Jivatma's Sheshatva or subservience and the subservience of the Achetana or insentient object. That is the answer to the first question. Second question is, when the Jivatma leaves the body, that is the outer shell, it is purely whether a person feels he is swatantra or not, whether a person realizes his subservience or not, he is purely controlled by the Supreme Lord. Because now, assuming that I have come into this body after being in some lokar, I should have had some previous, all of us, not only me, all of us should have had some previous births. So we have left the body, earlier body. Then we have traveled to some place, whether it is Swarga or Naraka or some other world or some state, some dormant state. Then once again, through the father's body and mother's body, we have entered into this body. And once again, we have to leave this body and go somewhere. Once again, we may be born or we may attain moksha, whatever it is. But once the Jivatma leaves the body, he has no, even when we are in the body, that is why I have been mentioned, we have no swatantriya except for some small aspects where we go, where we come, etc. Because even while we are sleeping, we actually breathe. It's an involuntary activity. Heart is pumping blood. It's an involuntary activity. If I want to stop it, I cannot stop it now. Or if it stops, I cannot revive it. It is not even, suppose a person has a heart attack and they do all the push their heart and push this place and do all those things. It may not revive because it's not in their hands. Even if the person is, even if the Jivatma is within the body, even the bodily functions are not under his control. So suppose I want to hold my breath for 20 seconds, will I be able to do it now? Or you be able to do it? No. It will start, suddenly it will jump out, the breath will jump out. That means even your breath you cannot control for more than, I may do it for 5 seconds, maximum 10 seconds. But suppose you have practiced for 10 years, then you may be able to do it for 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So the Jivatma is totally dependent because even his breathing is not under his control, the heart pumping is not under his control, all the bodily functions are totally not under his control. So where is his Swatantra? But he has an iota of Swatantra, it is given by the Lord himself. In the sense, suppose I have to do Ashtakshara Japa, that is in my hands to a particular extent. There, a little Swatantra is there. Or if somebody wants to afflict somebody, kill somebody, or harm somebody, they are able to do it. That means they have that small bit of Swatantra.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you very much.
I
Namaskar.
hope I have answered your question.
Yes, Swami, definitely. It was a very lucid and also very detailed explanation. Thank you, Swami. Namaskar.
Ramanujétyesha chatura chaturakshari kamavastham prapadyante jantavoham tamadrishah punyam bhoja vikasaya papadhvam takshayaya cha shrimanāvirabhūt bhūmau Ramanuja divakarah rinīkrita virinchāri nirankusha vibhūtayah Ramanujapanam bhoja samāshrena shālidah.